friends, it's Chari. Today I'm taking the new Spring Basket stamp set to create an everyday Hello Reveal Will card sure to brighten anyone's day. So of course I'm using the Spring Basket stamp set. I'll be using the basket with the flowers, and I'm also pulling in Veggie Happy with those cute little mice to tend our flower garden. So I've just pulled out all of the images that I'm going to use and I'm placing them in my MISTI. I'll stamp these in some jet black ink on some white cardstock so I can do some Copic coloring. I also need to cut a reveal will for the flowers in the basket. So I'm going to cut that from that same white cardstock. And then I'm going to use the template for the spring basket. Now this is the spring basket reveal will, not the drop down. I am creating a regular spring basket reveal will today. And I like to tape my template onto my circle so that it doesn't move around. So I'll just use some pieces of washi tape to do this. And now I have a guide where to place my flowers so that they show up inside the basket when the wheel turns. And I'm just going to stamp all these at once. I'm lining them up in the openings. I'll use my MISTI to pick up those stamps and then stamp them right into place with some jet black ink. Now I can get to coloring all of my images. I'm starting out with the cute little butterflies. I'm going to make a purple butterfly and a yellow butterfly. I tried to pick some colors that weren't maybe the color of the tulips, which I tend to color pink all the time. So I'm coloring a teal bow to go on my basket. Then for my little mice, I'm using some warm grays. So I have that W5 as my shadow, and I'm just going to go ahead and put the shadow on both of my mice. And then I'll blend it out with the W3. Next, I'll add a little bit of pink to the inside of their ears and a little dot on each of their noses. And then for their hats, I wanted it to look like straw hats, like they're out in the garden working. So I'm using the same yellows that I used on that yellow butterfly. And then I'm actually going to pull in an even darker yellow to color right underneath the brim of their hats for some extra shadow. Our little mouse here on the left side working is wearing some cute overalls, so I'm going to color those blue like some blue jeans. And then the little girl mouse on the other side, I will color in just a little bit. I wanted to wait and see kind of the saturation of my colors with all the flowers before I decided what color I wanted her apron to be. So for the tulips, as I said, I seem to always color those red or pink. So I'm coloring both batches of tulips the same. Then I'll come in and color the leaves. I like to use two shades on the leaves, a little bit of darkness right at the stem, and then blend it out with a lighter shade. To make the leaves of the daisies a little bit different, I'm coloring them all over with the light first, and then just a little tap of the dark color right at the stem. For the daffodils, I do like to do darker leaves for the daffodils. So I'm using the G09 and the G03 to blend it out. And of course, I'll color the daffodils in my reveal wheel exactly the same. I can just add a little more of that darker green to kind of make those shadows pop a little bit more. And then for the daffodils themselves, I'm using that dark yellow for the centers of the daffodils. My daffodils in my garden have bloomed and they have the really dark centers and the really bright yellow outer petals, and so I'm coloring my daffodils to look like the one that has bloomed in my flower bed. And then for the daisies, I'm just using that darker yellow just for the centers, and I'm going to leave the petals white. Now for my other little mouse, I decided her apron should be purple to bring in a little more purple in addition to my purple butterfly. So a purple apron with a pink tie. I think that's really cute. And then for my basket, I'm using the E70s. I did discover when I was coloring this that my markers were a little dry. I did refill them after I was done making this card. They were quite empty actually, so you're going to see me have to color a little bit more to get that blending to happen. But I used that darker shade to add some shadows, and now I'm blending out with that E70. You can see I'm kind of struggling a little bit to blend it out, but again, that's because my marker was dry and I refilled it as soon as I was done. And now I'm using that E74 to trace those little lines in the basket. I think that's always fun to kind of highlight those little lines in the basket and add some more detail. And then once I have this colored, I will just add a little bit of cream color to that little ribbon or lace that's around the top. You could also color this to match the basket if you didn't want it to be a contrasting color. And then I'm going to use the coordinating dies to cut all these out. And I am cutting out the center of the basket so that we can use the opening to create a reveal wheel. Now for my background, I'm using a piece of the Bitsy Blooms 12 by 12 paper. I love this blue paper with those little daisies, and I'm using it for the sky, which I think is fun. It kind of looks like the flowers are flying around in the sky. I'm using the square reveal wheel, and I'm using the spring basket reveal wheel add-on to cut my opening. Then I'm going to take a piece of green spiffy speckles paper for the bottom. We're going to create a little grassy hill for our basket to sit up on. It is kind of high, so we're going to have a lot of grass, but it's perfect because we're going to put a big die cut sentiment below. So I'm using that same square reveal wheel to cut my spiffy speckles paper. I'm just layering that on there so I can get a good placement, adding my basket, and then I'm going to pull out one of these simple grassy hillsides to cut the top of this green paper with, and I'm using that basket as a guide so I know just how high to cut my grass. So I'll just hold this in place with a little bit of removable tape and run this through my die cut machine. To make the grass stand out a little bit more against that blue pattern paper, I'm just dusting the top with a little bit of celery stick ink using my blending brush. Now I can add this to my blue panel right along the bottom, and I have this fun grassy hill along the bottom for my sentiment to go. I'm also going to go ahead and add some of my images. I will add my basket that I die cut, adding that with some liquid glue right to the background. And I'm also taking some of those individual flowers that I colored and cut out and tucking them behind the grass. I am using a adhesive runner so that if I need to move them later, I can, which you're going to see me do with those daisies on the right. And then I'm just putting my little mice on there for some placement. I will pop those up with some foam here in just a little bit. I'm adding the bow to my basket and the little butterflies to the sky. So now for the sentiment and the background panel, I want to use a piece of the pint-sized pattern summertime paper. I like this pink with the stripe. So I'm going to cut this piece down to be a 4¼ square so it will cover my card base and I'll get that nice bright pink border around my reveal wheel panel. And then I'll just add this to a card base. I'm also going to use this extra piece here to cut out my sentiment using the Scripty Hello. Now to make this sentiment stand out a little bit more on that grass, I'm going to cut 2 more Scripty Hellos from some Guava Cardstock, and I'm just going to use my liquid glue to stack these and laminate them together to make a nice fat sentiment for my card. This is always a fun way to take one of these more delicate die cuts and make them stand out a little bit more. So I'll just put my mice here so I can kind of see their placement and see exactly where that hello needs to go. And I can go ahead and add that to my grass. And you can see now that fills up that grass at the bottom nicely. Now I realized that my reveal wheel was white, so I had white in my basket and I wanted to kind of match the sky in the background. So I just pulled out some blue Copic markers and I am just going to add blue coloring all around this wheel, staying inside that score line that is on the wheel so that the part that we move with our finger on the side stays white. and I'm just blending it out till I get a really nice smooth blend. You're not going to see a lot of this, but those little added details really add something extra to your card. Now I can reassemble my template. I like to use my template to help me place my images in the opening. This is optional. You don't have to do this, of course, but this is how I like to do it. So I can take that template and line it up with the opening. You can see that my wheel was kind of covered up with the daisies, so I'm just pulling those off and shifting them over a little bit. I don't mind that they are over that little thumb opening, but I still want to be able to move my wheel, obviously. So I'm taking the small wheel from the reveal wheel. I'm going to put my brad through it. Then I'm going to put this through the whole wheel, including the template, and open it up. Don't worry, we'll take this off here in a little bit. And then I can put my foam squares on that small wheel. This is the part we're going to stick to the background. Now I do need to go ahead and prep my card base because I have not done that yet. So I'm taking that piece of pattern paper that I cut to 4 1/4 square, putting it on a card base, and then I'm just going to use my trimmer to trim off the excess. So now I have a 4 1/4 top folding square card. I also cut the reveal wheel panel from a piece of Guava cardstock, so I could use this as my back panel for my reveal wheel. So I've pulled the liner paper off those 3 foam squares I put on that small circle. I'm lining up my template with my window, and then I'm just going to line up these 2 square panels and just kind of drop this in place, and now I know my wheel is in the proper place. So I can close that brad and take off the wheel, remove it from there. Now the little wheel's not going anywhere and the brad's not going anywhere. And now I can take my template off and just pop this wheel back onto that brad and open it back up. So if you want to use your template as a guide, that is how I do it. Now I can add foam squares all around, making sure to not impede the movement of my reveal wheel. And I can line up these 2 square panels again and sandwich that wheel right between those 2 panels. And now my spring basket is ready to have different flowers inside of it. It's always fun to play with these, but I need to finish up my card, so I'm going to flip this over, add some liquid glue to that back panel. Then I can center this up on my card base with that pretty patterned paper and pop that in place. And now I'm ready to add my little mice, and I'm using some thin foam squares to add these just so that they have a little bit more dimension off of those flowers and that basket in the background. I also need to add the little arrow that tells someone to turn the wheel to make the flowers change. So I just used the little arrow from the reveal wheel die set and cut that from white cardstock. Now I did have this extra flower bunch here and I was trying to figure out a clever place to put it, but I did not really find a place on the front. I am going to trim off that extra white piece on the bottom, and I thought about cutting them apart. I decided against it. I really couldn't find a place that worked here on the front, so I'm going to put it on the inside. And of course we need to add some glitter, so I'm adding glitter to the butterflies and the bow. And since I want to add those flowers on the inside, I'm also going to add a little sentiment on the inside using the Henry's Build a Sentiment Love. I love that this has the words to spell out to my favorite person. So I spelled that out on my block. I'm going to use some guava ink to match my pink sentiment on the front. And then I will add those little daffodils right on the very bottom of my card, which I think is super cute. And here is my finished spring basket reveal wheel card with that hello everyday theme. I love these flowers and I love that on this card I don't have to choose and I can just change the flowers. I also love that little added sentiment on the inside with those daffodils. This spring card will make anyone's day brighter. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.